Welcome, physical educators. This is Thinking PE.
Because Phi-Ed is more than just fun and games.
I'm Stacy Nelson,
And I'm Jamie Seneca.
and it's our goal to dig deeper beyond the activities that make your class awesome.
So buckle up and join us on this journey. Hey, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Stacy.
We're here at Thinking PE. Follow us on Twitter at Thinking PE. And after this video, we want to hear your comments and things we can add. We're here with a video on priorities of PE.
Yeah, we're going to take a peek at some of the priorities that PE teachers feel when or the pressures people have put on us when we're trying to develop this curriculum. I don't know about another time-strapped place in education. I mean, we just get very little time, and more pressure is being put on to put more and more things into our PE curriculum.
And even coming up with the questions, it was hard to narrow it down to 10 different topics and then to try to rank them. And number one, I was shocked by the overwhelming response we got. I mean, we had 100 responses within the first day and a half.
A neat response. People are curious. They want us to get this video out and tell us what we learned. So,
and I like how you form the question there with the caveat that everything is important, because it's like we're juggling, and every ball we throw up in the air is as important as the next one. And but being forced to sit down and only select 6 of them and then rank them was fascinating.
Yeah, it really made you have to think about everything you're doing and why, and really do exactly what we asked to do. It made you prioritize it.
So that big question, with the caveat that all things are important, label your top 6 priorities in order. All right, so it was a 1 through 6, simple format. Just give us your top 6, and let's dive right into what some of those responses were. First looking out at the big picture here, and what we found was relationships and skill works were our top tier answers. 58 people responded that it was in their top 1 or top 2. And then one thing I took away is fun. Really started off fast, but then it plummeted quickly. So what was some of your takeaways right away?
The fun plummeted quickly. Is that what you said?
That's the fun plummeted quickly.
I wonder if that's typical of some Phi-Ed teachers. They start out real fun, and then all this pressure is added onto them, and the fun plummets quickly.
The captain came on, pardon the interruption, but we're about to, we got good news and bad news. The good news is we're landing. The bad news is we're crashing.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a couple of takeaways that building strong relationships soared to the top after that, making sure it was fun. And then I think the top 4 or 5 were what I thought they would be.
Yeah.
And then the other peripheral ones are the ones that feel like people are trying to add on, that different people have their thing, and when they really get on Twitter or they're up front speaking at a convention, that's their deal.
Yep.
And they may not be trying to say it, but you get this feeling, oh, I should, if I'm a good teacher, I'm going to be gamifying my lessons, or if I'm a good teacher, I'm going to be doing technology, and I got to do that more. And well, you see that 6 different times, you start to feel like you can't teach at all.
And you take away from it too that all of them are important, and everybody has their own teaching style, their own passions, their own interest, and just like you said, some people latch on to something and that's what they run with, because that's what they, that's what they find their drive in.
Right.
And they identify most closely with. So, it's not to say one is any better, any worse than the other. And that's what's cool about the overwhelming responses. It really got a big picture here. Another thing, 85% of the responses were elementary teachers.
It'd be interesting, and we've talked about this, maybe doing a follow-up to this, where we bring on somebody just fresh out of college, or bring on somebody that's a high school or a middle school teacher as well, and get their perspective.
So let's dive right into it. The first one was aligning the standards.
And this might be even strange talk we're both from Minnesota and teach there. And
yeah,
it's a big deal right now, because by 2021, all classrooms, all PE classrooms in Minnesota have to have all 300 some standards fully implemented
300 benchmarks into the
benchmark
5 different standards.
into their curriculum. And so it's been a lot of buzz talk around Minnesota, and that's a lot of pressure. That's partially where this came from. This question came from, because I go to these conventions and that's what they're talking about is push, 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 push. Well, I've already tried to add these other things in, and now you're saying I should do this and focus here. So people in other states may not feel that pressure.
Well, it's just if they haven't reviewed their standards in the last few years like Minnesota has, it's just not as fresh. Because
Yeah.
there was a 20-year gap in there of before Minnesota renewed its standards.
Yeah.
Ranked aligning the standards in their top 3 choices.
Okay, it was priority 1, 2, or 3.
Probably, yep, 1, 2, or 3. And then 25% of the respondents did not rank it in their top 6 at all.
25%, yeah. So it's 1 out of 4 didn't even see that it made the list here. Out of the 10 things we put, it was really hard to find some stuff on Twitter. General games and kind of things, no problem. Find activities, basketball type of drills, and they're all over the place. But try to find some things that are related specifically to standards, which is how he has to write his lesson plans based on the standards. It's just hard to search standards. So just kind of a push for us teachers when you put a game out, what standard are you teaching? It would probably be more than one, but at least list one, maybe the hardest one. The skill breakdown usually is the hardest one. Put that right in your tweet, and then we can search those out, and so kind of develop a bank of these different skills. It'll just make it easier to search for people as standards become a bigger deal, because I think they are across the country. Would you say?
I would agree.
So I think there's going to be a push towards standards-based grading of some sort, whether it replaces traditional grading or not. There's going to be at least a push towards it, and so I think it would help.
The second one on our list of topics here is activity time in class, and activity time was ranked either number 1 or number 2, and 75% ranked it in their top 3. So it was definitely towards the top of 75% of the people's choices.
Which makes me feel good about our community. That if you're going to have kids in class, you're at least thinking about getting them active and not telling stories. Although you might be a good storyteller, so that might be appropriate at times. But it just seems like it's a natural fit that it should be in our one of the top priorities.
So when I found Shape America states that at least 50% of your class, your students should be in that moderate to vigorous physical activity. And just with activity time being ranked so high that at least 50% of the class time should be dedicated to that moderate to vigorous physical activity. And it's how hard that can actually be.
It's deceiving.
It is. And if you're doing like a relay race, even if you have partners, you're cutting activity time in half just by having partners for an activity.
Yeah.
We just got these Go for Sport Fit Step pedometers at my school, and I've used them in the past, but they measure that MVPA, and just like you said, it is deceiving to actually put that pedometer. I'm sorry,
MVPA is the moderate to vigorous.
Correct, moderate to vigorous physical activity.
All right, just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
And it was. We think we're getting that activity in our minds and in our heart. We know we're getting, our kids are getting that activity, but yeah. You put a pedometer on 30 kids and run an activity, and it can be very humbling very quickly.
Well, just putting a pedometer on 30 kids takes a couple minutes of your class time that you wanted to be moderately or vigorously exercising. So
I just think when I first saw that statistic, that Shape America says 50% of the class time, I'm thinking, wow, that's low.
Yeah.
When we put those pedometer on kids, and it really,
until you
really makes you think.
That's why I love research and studies, that until you really
and hard data, hard data.
That's because even if you videotaped your class and tried to record it, that'd be a ton of extra work. But that might get you to a similar figure. But otherwise, those pedometers are just a beautiful thing. It's the data's right there.
Yeah, and So we put so much emphasis on this activity time, and like I say, 75% of our responses really ranked it high.
Yep.
But then we found that 15% didn't rank it at all in the top 6.
Yeah, that
So
was the other thing we were going to talk about. These right down, yeah, 15% didn't even make the list. And then there's a couple that ranked it number 5 and number 6. But I want to be fair to people and say, I think you brought it up, Jamie. You said it'd be interesting to talk to those people. I bet they have a reason for
oh, absolutely.
why they put priority number 5 or 6. You want to explain what you're thinking, or at least a theory is? Because we really talked to these people. It was anonymous.
And they say they put it there for a reason. I was just trying to think, why would somebody not list activity so high, or why would they list relationships so high? And part of it might be they just, if I'm doing all these other things, the activity will naturally come.
Yeah.
And I thought, so that's kind of the route that I took on why they put their focus at something else, knowing that the activity will be a byproduct of that building relationship with a student or whatever they would have ranked as number 1.
Almost like that's a duh.
Yeah.
Gym class.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Yeah, everything's going to be activity. So I'm going to rank these other, I'm going to focus on these other things because everything I focus on is about an activity. So they just kind of dropped it on the list. That'd be my guess. Maybe people have other reasons as well.
And that'd be interesting. I think as we move forward and if you're listening to this, put comments in there, email us, because that extra information really does come in handy.
That's why we call this thinking PE, is let's think beyond just the natural thing. Well, duh, activity time. Why'd you even put that in the list? Well, because there's a lot of thinking that goes behind activity, and there's people that have different philosophies that you can come to what look really stupid sometimes conclusions, but when you listen to them, you go, huh, actually that's very well thought out. And if that's what you're thinking, it all works out in the end a lot of times. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think we got to give people credit for thinking, and then let's have the discussion. Let's not just berate each other for something that looks kind of silly on the surface.
And the next topic here, which was a number 1 or a number 2, is building relationships. 75% of the responses rank this in their top 3. And I know at my school, building relationships is one of the focal points of the school and the belief of our administration. But it's, again, it kind of goes to your point of, well, duh.
Well, kind of, but I don't know. You brought up an interesting couple of points when we were discussing this earlier. Number 1 was that we say this, and we believe it, but what do we really do? I have 670 kids. How many do you have?
700.
700. So I mean,
and that was the point I was going to make. Is we say we're going to do it. We want to build relationships with students. We know how important building relationships with students is, but it's when do we actually do it, and how deep of relationships can we actually have? When we have 600 kids that you see once every 4 days for 40 minutes, or whatever your time frame is.
And a point that I was at a conference recently and talked to somebody. He was on the board at MinShape, and I was discussing some of my concerns over some of these similar issues. And we started getting into talking about assessing and grading. We're jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but he talked about how he got big into assessing. He loved data and dug in. But then he said he found himself constantly behind a clipboard.
Yeah.
And he was recording, he was watching the kids, and he was, assessing every skill, and he was just getting into it, had all this data to work with, and soon realized that he was distancing himself. What he used to do is walk around the gym and engage with the kids and, take a hockey stick and say, here's how you hold it, turn the hand around, or throwing this way. He used to engage. Now he was behind a clipboard, and he found himself just losing. Well, for him, he talked about his desire for teaching. It just plummeted because of this assessing and grading. And so that's kind of where some of this discussion started. It was like, okay, they're both important, but what are you doing to make sure you're building these relationships? And it might mean you have to drop some activity time. if depending what you're going to do to build that relationship. So
It's kind of it's a return on investment, so to speak, where you put your time and energy into building those relationships, knowing that you're going to get a return on that time invested.
yeah, like I'll just say this quickly. I struggle with, I know you love instant activities and you bring kids in, they're moving instantly. That ties to our first one, activity time in class. But personally, I have a really hard time learning names. And so I bring the kids in and I sit them down and I go through my seating chart. And if I do that, it refreshes the kids' names in my head. And then I can call them by name in class, which I think helps build that relationship. And so somebody might look at me and go, "Oh, you don't value activity time in class." And I'm saying, "No, that's not true. I actually do, but I actually really need that time for building relationships. And then I can get to the active time. And then, like you said, the return on investment is huge because I can call them by name and not go have to say, "Hey,
Absolutely.
George, you say that." So anyway, just kind of a
No,
bouncing around between these things. You can see the internal struggle I have with some of them.
The next one on the list is actually the one that when I did this, I put fun as number one.
Yep.
Just immediately right off the bat. And I was disheartened to see how it plummeted. It started off really, really fast. It was like Usain Bolt just took off on a dead sprint, leading the pack, and then tripped and fell on his shoelaces.
Well, that's because you and I were the first two to
do
the survey, and we both kind of had those as number one. And so that was way up top from the beginning.
Michael Phelps with a 3-length lead, and all of a sudden he's floating or he's sinking to the bottom. But and I was also shocked that 20% didn't even rank fun in their top 6, and I kind of go back to that point I was making before, where it maybe they didn't rank it in the top 6 because it's a byproduct of all the other things that we do.
I hope so. That's one I do hope. I hope we haven't lost the idea that fun should be a part of PE. Maybe again, people have good reasons for not needing that to be ranked so high. Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that you've helped me with throughout my career was keeping that focus of having fun. That when we built our common assessments and did our and assessing students and collecting data, it was always looking back. Okay, we're going to assess students today. How are they going to have fun while we're doing that?
Yeah.
Because if we're just pulling them off the side one at a time to test them on throwing, that's not as much fun as if they're playing a game and we can watch them play that game and run that same assessment over a period of time.
Yeah. And that showed our values, that.
And that's why I ranked fun number one, was to keep that focus of the kids having fun. It was my belief that they'd be more active, and I'm building a better relationship if they're having fun.
Yeah. So you're kind of tying those top 3 right together.
Yeah. And they really do all mesh together.
They build on each other. I can see where the relationships kids could have fun and you not really be building a relationship other than seeing you as a fun teacher,
And I think without an explanation of fun, it's almost taboo, or there's a fear to say that we focus on having fun, as it might degrade the profession.
That's something that's out there on Twitter. You can't just play games for fun. And again, I don't want to start a big controversy and argue with those people that are putting and pushing that have their reasons for it too. And it's a fair argument. I mean, that we need to make sure we're doing things with purpose, but I don't know of a fun activity that I do that doesn't fulfill several purposes, several standards,
It's we as FAD teachers, we can, the fun game we play in class is different than the fun game they play at recess. Even though it might be the same game, there's different things happening, and that's where the tying of the standards come in, the assessments, those sort of things.
Can you say just a little bit more about that? How is a tag game in FIAD different than playing tag on the playground, or red light, green light, or something like that?
Well, I think it's because we put learning into that of what standard they might be learning. Like our tag game, we may be focusing on the accepting of being tagged, the moving in space safely, what kind of exercise, working on locomotor skills during that tag game. So there's there's deliberate learning taking place in a particular game versus and hopefully they take what we do in that Phy Ed class and apply it to a recess setting.
So they get both the fun, just the pure fun,
Mm-hmm.
and then they get the fun with the extra standards or learning behind it. Okay.
So and then the next topic was skill work.
Time for skill work. Again, I've heard the buzz lately at conferences and this type of thing where some people are really promoting it and some people are saying to go away from that and that's boring. And so they're really pushing in many ways away from it. And I don't know if these are different age groups, if it's all elementary or if it's some high school, if there would be a difference there. But yeah, I've heard people kind of pushing away from that drill and practice, I guess they call it.
Yeah.
It isn't as valued as, again, that's because kind of fun is supposed to be ranked high. And one of the other ones, gamifying your lessons, making it engaging. They don't feel that giving students an individual ball or puck or type of thing is, and drilling it over and over. And that's a hard one. Because if you're a coach, you know I teach the pole vault.
Yeah.
And I always tell the kids, you can't think yourself to the next height. You can't just, come to coach and say, hey, do this different, and then go back and do it. Very rarely does that work. The phrase I use is you have to drill yourself to the next level. And so when you're teaching PE, especially at elementary level, you're trying to give them the skill.
You can't just say you need to do it better.
No, I can't just say, hey, get your feet up. Well,
I can't believe I didn't make it to the professional ranks as a coach.
you were overlooked. But especially in things like that are that technical. But same thing with even teaching throwing. Oh, throw with the opposite foot. You can tell them that, and a lot of kids can do it, but a lot of times you need to drill, and then they'll get it. And then when they come back to you, they don't have it. So you drill. But how does that interact with making it fun? That's where those priorities are. You've got to be able to either come up with ways to make them fun, do it, drills fun, or maybe don't do it. I don't know. What do you think?
Skill work was an interesting one for me. It has a unique ability to avoid controversy because there's a real defined top group in our survey and a real defined, I don't want to say bottom group, but one that wasn't picked as much. And skill work just found its happy little way in the middle, like a happy shrub in a Bob Ross painting.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people picked it.
Just somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, but 30% of them didn't feel it made the rank, so it didn't rank that high. So, but like you said, it kind of fit right in the middle, and I made it something that wasn't controversial. I made it more controversial.
So then we go on to assessing and grading.
56% of the people, over half the people, didn't rank assessing and grading as something that's really all that important.
And that's interesting because it's, I think we talked, there's a perception out there that, when it comes to grading, nobody cares. Nobody looks at the report card. So do you put that effort,
anyway? Yeah.
Do you put that effort into the grading and it definitely brings up some controversy and some discussion, but it is, we went to that standards conference and being able to assess or validate what you're doing is definitely, it validates your position.
Grading you think of as more summative, and the assessing is more formative. We're doing formative assessments all the time, from is this lesson working to is that kid holding the stick correctly. And if they're not holding the stick correctly, you've assessed it, you go over and you help them and you fix it, and he practices correctly now. And you're monitoring and adjusting with that information. Often with grading, unfortunately, it's a summative thing. It's at the end, and we basically trying to tell the kid, oh, they stink. And you're not going, they didn't hold the stick correctly. You just tell them they failed holding the stick, but now you're on to the basketball unit, so you're not holding sticks anymore. And he never gets a chance to, he just sees on his report card that he failed. Obviously that is a bad example, a pretty specific example, but you just send out a C, and what does a C mean? It's got
So
so much variance. So that's the difference I see.
the other part of that is, what do you do with the data? So you're collecting all this assessment data, and it goes, if you're just assessing to assess, then I don't know. I don't know that that's time well spent.
Yeah,
If I'm well, like you said, you're collecting this data on a student that isn't meeting a standard, but you never come back to that standard. Then what was the purpose behind the assessment? And it didn't drive any instruction. It didn't drive any curriculum.
yeah, yeah. That's something I've really wrestled with. Is we
And
we
the
put a
student
lot of
didn't find
effort.
out. And the student didn't find out about it until 6 weeks later when they saw the report card.
Yeah, I mean, you and we've developed several rubrics, and we've used them, then refined them, and found out it's hard to use them, and then I started kind of going, okay, we collected this data, and then we use the data as global information between schools to see how I'm teaching, you're teaching. So at least we're using it somewhat, but it started bothering me that we were kind of using it as summative data on a unit. We would go out and teach and then find out how many students are meeting the standard. Okay,
And then not visit it again until next year.
yeah, and the next, to go back to it, started kind of eating at me, going, well, if we're not going back to help kids, what are we doing here? It feels like maybe we should relook at our curriculum, and instead of doing units, recircle, touch on things over and over, rather than just do a unit and be done. And then, oh, they didn't make it. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I haven't come up with a solution yet, but it's at least a question I think should be raised.
So the next topic there was including technology, and 83% did not rank technology in their top 6.
So it's just not a big one for our group, that at least that.
There was more integration of cross-curricular than technology, and
more people think they should teach reading in FIAD than have technology.
but maybe that's where, when they say and again, maybe it's not a number one priority, because it's the integration of the technology versus just using it. That you're using the technology to enhance the activity versus just walking in and saying, I'm going to use this technology.
Yeah. And it's an interesting push. I feel like it's more than that out there on social media, Twitter land and elsewhere. And I have a student teacher, and it's coming from the colleges, that there's this push to have teachers not only use technology, but to have students in FIAD class using technology. It's almost like a standard, even though it's not one of our Minnesota ones.
Yeah.
Kind of being pushed from the college level, and from, I don't know what to call our social media, but there's some pushes out there. I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but it's almost pushing beyond using technology or integrating technology. And we've talked about that, where integrating it should be almost invisible. If it's truly integrated, you don't notice it, like turning a light on. But if it's pushed, and the students, you're telling your kids to bring their phones into gym class because we want to do this type of a thing. If it fits, that's beautiful. And if it helps you get to your goal. But if your goal is to get them to use technology, that is confusing to me.
I would agree.
So not to say it's 100% wrong. Again, somebody could probably give a good argument and fill me in, but I have my master's in integrating technology, and that was kind of one big push from the beginnings that we learned, is the technology isn't the point. And this was from 10, 15 years ago. It's like, we got to get away from that. The point is, let's use this technology to accomplish good teaching, good solid teaching techniques. So I don't know if enough said about that.
The next one's yoga, mindfulness, and mental health. And this one I didn't list it, but I can see it growing when we start talking about the concerns of students' mental health and just mental health as a society.
Yeah, I can see where it's going to become a bigger deal. We have a place in Fayette where we see all the kids and they
Hmm.
get put into intense situations. They get put in places where they can't do something. They can't jump a rope. They try and they can't, and there's those frustrations. And so, if we can teach them some of the mindfulness things and skills, I think that's really good. And I'm not, I'm really ignorant to yoga, so I don't want to speak on that. But I've heard of some people doing some amazing things with yoga, and they're really big on thinking this is important for kids to know physically how to get in touch with the inner part, not just the muscles and how they make them move on the outside, but how do you get in touch with the inner physical part of your body?
So the next piece though is cross-curricular activity and integrating of math and reading, for instance, into what we do.
And
And
is there
it
a push
wasn't,
for that? Do you feel that?
it was not ranked very high at all.
No.
Um, not ranked at all or at the bottom of people's lists, but it goes to who you ask, because if you're ever going for an interview, that's a question that's going to be asked is how are you going to support this building goal? And we talk about the pressures we have as Phi-Ed teachers. Administration and our buildings are on tremendous pressure for just their math and reading scores. So their big question is, how are you going to support my math goal, or I say our math goal or our reading goal?
So it can be a big deal. And I think what you said, you want to share just a brief bit about your reading wall or your word wall? Is that what you called it?
I'll edit that one out anyway.
You may want to edit some of that out, but no, I thought it was
No,
interesting that you tried. You worked with this.
yeah, and I put the walls or put the words up on the wall, and we had this word of the day, and I just thought it was something great. I'm integrating reading, integrating literature, and when I reflect back on it, I just said, man, that was a colossal waste of time. I mean, it really was, and part of it might have been how I integrated, how I presented it. We didn't really, but I told you at the end of the year, if I just sat my 5th grade class down and faced opposite of the word wall and gave them a sheet of paper and said, write down 3 words on that wall, I don't know that any one of them could have put a word down.
Yeah.
So part of it,
goes to how you might have used it and that kind of thing, but
absolutely. It definitely wasn't a focus of mine at that time. It was me trying to slam a round peg into a square hole. The Marine side of me, like, oh, I'll make this fit.
Yeah.
I'll just get a bigger hammer. And, that's just not how, so, now I take a more deliberate approach to trying those things. And you talked about it, how, if you're running a relay race, instead of picking up inanimate objects, we're picking up letters of the alphabet in a kindergarten class, and trying to more deliberately use some of those things they do in the classroom, but it is challenging.
Yeah. And for me, again, I'm not opposed to it. I just look at what has research told us. Does research tell us that when we're on a scooter and we pick up a letter and bring it back and then work with the group, if it really shows that makes an impact, then I'm willing to flex more with the standards that I've been given to teach. But otherwise, I kind of have to do like technology is I have to integrate that in. And if reading integrates fine into it, like I'm doing like you said, grabbing letters instead of grabbing a yarn ball, well, that's fine. You can teach both then. But I just can't get myself to really focus on that when I just haven't seen the research that shows that it really, what I do in a Phi-Ed class will impact that reading, other than I have seen the research that when they go from my classroom and they go into a reading class afterwards, there's some studies that show that those students learn at a really accelerated rate because of the exercise. It wasn't because of the words I used in Phi-Ed. I haven't seen that. And if it's true, and I'd love to see that research and then change my mind, man, and change my curriculum along with it. I don't know how you feel about that kind of approach, or it sounds kind of nasty, like prove it to me, but in some ways I feel like I have to at some point. I can't include everything.
it's a tremendous, it is one of those things. It's a tremendous amount of work on the front end to go to classroom teachers, see what they're working on in class, and then bring that into your gym. Try to integrate it into an activity that you're doing, and then the other side of it is it's hard to measure my individual impact on if a student's MCA scores go up 15 points.
Yeah.
And I can say I was responsible for that for 2 of those points. And, as part of it, you have to trust in the process, but it's tough because there isn't that tangible, because we did this activity, they had this, and you can probably do it. You can do it. And I've seen it done in small groups.
Mm-hmm.
You take a distinct group of kids that are struggling in math or reading and immerse them into activity-based math and reading. But that's not the regular class. And now when we start talking 700 kids,
yep,
that is, if I look at all these, to be able to effectively, that is one of the more challenging ones for me.
Yeah.
So that brings us to gamifying. And this was a new term for me. And this is just, this is a dumb farm kid from Wisconsin. When you said gamifying, I'm like, hey, go Packers. I didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue what gamifying was. And now I'll let you go ahead and define that, because I'll just beat that up.
Oh, you're going to let me beat it up.
Yeah, if I didn't even know what it was, so have me define it. That's a mistake. That's like me trying to explain quantum physics here.
Yeah, right. No, I guess I picked this up on podcasts that I listened to, and Twitter feeds and articles that I've picked up on. And the idea that I get is that these kids are playing these video games, and the writers of those games or the designers of those games are masters at knowing how to increase the time and the engagement of these students. And some of the tricks, call them tricks, techniques that they use are to withhold, it's called scarcity, to deliberately withhold. So in a FIAG classroom, you gamify, so you might say, okay, until you get to a certain level, you can't use this piece of equipment. Or, so maybe it's individual jump ropes. So you have individual jump ropes, and if when you can do 5 in a row, you can graduate to the long ropes and in doing groups. And it makes those students really work hard to be the first group to be doing the long ropes. That's just something I made up off the top of my head. So I don't know. Somebody that's really into this might think I'm just totally butchering it, but that's the idea. It's taking the techniques of engagement that video games use, scarcity and, ramping up and leveling up and all those types of things, and then applying to, your games to make them more engaging. So I don't, in elementary, I don't have, the games are engaging, the kids are full all in. So I don't need a ton of it, but I can see where if I was teaching junior high or high school, where that might be some really interesting ways to challenge you used another term where you're diversifying.
I call it challenge by choice. That came from Dr. Martinez, which was a professor of mine, when I was going through school. And it was just that idea where the student creates their challenge. You give them a bunch of options and show them different ways, and ultimately they create the challenge that that they want to participate safely, successfully, and with satisfaction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I don't know, that kind of came in lower, maybe because people haven't heard the term.
And that's why it came in lower for me. I mean, now knowing what that term gamifying means, it may change how I would have filled out the survey.
Yeah. Because it correlates highly to fun, which was your number one.
Absolutely. And activity, it keeps the kids more engaged.
Yep.
So just some closing thoughts here, things that were left out, and one thing I found, fitness could be in there. Maybe that, if that, as a high school teacher, that becomes, they look at the scope and sequence of a physical education, K to 12, maybe fitness comes more important at a certain level.
Maybe goal setting.
I never thought of that one.
Another one that would fit into that whole.
Sportsmanship.
Yep. Those are all covered under the standards, at least the Minnesota standards.
Yeah.
So we didn't completely leave them out, but technically, but
You know, we go back to how people rank things, and people are different. And you notice that 8 out of the 10 topics were listed as a number one. So, I mean, that speaks volumes just to people's interest and teaching styles and grade, you know, what they're teaching, where they're teaching, that there's no right or wrong
is that
answer.
high or low in your mind?
I think it's really high.
Okay.
I would have predicted that 3 of them would have been an overwhelming number one, whether, you know, between relationship building, fun, and activity in class would have been.
Yeah,
I would have wrongfully predicted that would have been like everybody's number one in some way, shape, or form.
yeah.
So I found it really interesting that 8 out of the 10 topics were picked number one.
By at least somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting to me too, and it shows again why I kind of wanted to get this out here, because I want to have discussions around these things. I don't, and maybe it's just me that takes on that pressure when you get a tweet and somebody's pushing their thing, and it's like, you know, this is they don't even say it, but I get the feeling like, oh, this is, you know, the new thing. Do it this way. You know, technology, and for whatever reason, I take that on, and maybe that's just a personal deal on myself. I don't, not other people feel that. They're just going, oh, that's nice for him. He uses technology. He's doing great with it. And they don't feel the pressure to do that. But I start feeling like there's this movement when I hear it from 5 different places, you know, technology, technology, technology. Well, I'm a technology integrationist. That's my master's. So it's not like I don't believe in it, but the idea behind it is like, oh no, I don't want it to become the point. And so I feel this kind of a pressure. And that's what I was just wondering if other teachers feel these different things. You know, now I'm having to do standards, and, you know, like, I want to keep it fun, but I want to get movement, but I have to do drills. And so I only have the kids once a week. How do I fit all that in there and build relationships and do it all? That's where my stress levels comes from. Is that just a personal issue I have, and people are just going to kind of go, hey dude, take a chill pill and just enjoy your job. maybe that's what I should do.
So yeah, we all got to step back and look. We all do. We have it pretty good. It's good career field to be in. So yeah, a couple shout outs here to the Facebook groups that we put this out there at PE Central, and elementary PE teachers. You know, thank you for taking the time to fill out that survey. The St. Francis teachers.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And then my teachers down in the Eastern Carver County schools that also filled out this survey. And then some shout outs on Twitter to those that retweeted us at Kinesiology MC, at Dr. Roca, at Renard Anasi. Sorry about that, bud. we appreciate it. At Fusharan, at MJ Hamada, and at Jenkins Alyssa, and last but certainly not least, at Schaefer_Mike. Thank you for retweeting that and helping us promote this so we can get those 100 responses so quickly.
Yeah, that was really fun to have that much input and be able to put this back out, because there were some people that were asking about it, and they were asking what if they could have the responses back.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I didn't know where this was going, but man, it took off. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. This is Stacy and Jamie. You can follow us on Twitter at ThinkingPE.
And you can maybe send them to our website. We're constructing at thinkingpe.com. You can find some other resources as well. We're slowly building that up as well.
Please connect with us, and you know, give us your comments and things you'd like to see, and definitely comments on this topic.
That'd be awesome. All right, good discussion, Jamie. I hope some people add some comments in so they can show where we our narrow brains are focused and where we missed.
All right, thank you.